Welcome to the Netma Show, where we discuss news and current events and analyze how those things impact your everyday life. My name is Kellen, and this is week 2 of 2019. And we've continued to start off hot because this week there are a number of breaking news items that I think are important to discuss. So this week we had President Donald Trump making his case for the $5.6 billion wall and how that's impacting the government shutdown. President Trump went on to describe how American citizens and families have lost loved ones due to gang violence coming in from south of the border, as well as drugs that are also entering the country. Now, at the same time, Democrats made the response to President Trump's plea for American support for the wall. Democrats took an approach of saying that Trump is throwing a temper tantrum and saying, no, if he doesn't get his way, we're going to shut down the government. And they are proposing ideas like maybe enhanced technology or perhaps adequate staffing of the border to help reduce the number of people and drugs that enter the country. Now, in my opinion, I think Donald Trump did a better job of laying out his case. And when it came to the Democrats, I was kind of left thinking, well, all right, if you're suggesting this alternative idea, investing in technology or increasing staffing, how much does that cost, right? Is that going to be the $5.6 billion or is it going to be more? What's the difference in the cost? What are the long-term costs? Because if you're hiring people, I think that's going to be a longer period that you're paying rather than paying to build the wall. It all kind of depends. I'm not in support of the wall whatsoever. However, I do want to get the government open again so those 800,000 people that are not being paid, they can get paid so they can continue to support their families. And also in political news, let's venture down to Venezuela because the president, Nicolas Maduro, was inaugurated for his second term, his second 6-year term, and his election was plagued in scandal. So, for example, there were some folks saying that they were offered food for a vote for Maduro. Now, keyword on that was offered food, and that's because he's done such a bad job governing the country that there is a food shortage. I mean, basic services like electricity and medical care are in short supply. In fact, during his reign, the Venezuelan inflation rate hit 1.4 million%. And this year it's expected to hit 10 million%. I didn't even know it could get that high. I mean, what happens? That must mean that their Venezuelan dollar is worth literally nothing. You lose money for carrying around one of those Venezuelan dollars. But nevertheless, the situation is so bad there that 3 million people have fled Venezuela, going to other Latin American countries in search of a better life. And it's important to note that the United States, as well as the European Union, do not acknowledge Maduro's presidency. And finally, let's think about a store that you probably haven't been in a long time, at least I haven't, and that's Sears. My first employer over a decade ago, they are going bankrupt and they're going through the liquidation process, although their chairman is attempting to save the company. Sears, it's special to me, I guess, because that was the first place that ever hired me. I was a 16-year-old boy working in the women's department, and that was the most awkward experience I could have ever had. I mean, why would you have a 16-year-old boy work in the women's department? I have no idea. And it's important to note that the only reason I stopped working there was because that store went out of business. So that tells you that Sears has been struggling for over a decade, and they finally gotten to the end. Now, this week, our main topic is going to be the Mute R. Kelly movement and the Lifetime Network's Surviving R. Kelly docuseries. It's a 6-part documentary series in which there were a number of women that detailed their experiences of physical, mental, and sexual abuse at the hands of Robert Kelly, known as R. Kelly. Now, some of these people even went into describing how they were brought into a sex cult where, for lack of better terms, they were kind of brainwashed into proceeding in the behaviors that R. Kelly wanted them to be in. And I remember when this first came up in 2016, I did not believe that whatsoever. I was like, R. Kelly of all people, how is he brainwashing people? And at the time, I just didn't think he would be smart enough to brainwash someone into a sex cult. But it turns out, it sounds like he actually is. And he managed to recruit people into this. Now, the thing, when I say recruit people, most of the time, it was young girls. Keyword on girls, meaning that they were underage in many cases. And in others, they were around 18 and 19, still not quite at that point of being a grown woman, but, they're still of legal age. And that's important because, well, decades ago, he was accused of entering sexual relations with underage girls, minors. And in fact, he was tried in a case for urinating on an underage girl and conducting a lewd sex act, right? So in that case, he was acquitted, right? And just because someone was acquitted, that doesn't mean that they were 100% innocent, in my opinion. I mean, think about it. In my head, I think of Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman was acquitted, but that doesn't mean that he didn't do anything. And when I think of that, I think of the phrase, where there's smoke, there's fire. And that's important because in the documentary, there were some parents that permitted their child to be in the presence of Mr. Kelly when they knew about the accusations. And in fact, one couple went on to say that they were aware of the charges that had been levied against him. However, they knew he was acquitted and therefore thought it was okay. Now, granted, they did use some level of common sense in saying that their daughter could not be around Mr. Kelly without them or some other person present. But the fact that you let your child hang out with an accused sexual predator is a little disturbing to me on many levels. Now, regardless of what came of the TV program, I think that it's important that at least we men take a moment to step back and think about the plight of women. I remember that in college, that was the first time that I had ever really recognized the issues that women face. So for example, we went through this activity where women detailed their experiences on our campus and even prior to that. Then again, when I went through premarital counseling, we learned about how much more prevalent sexual abuse is. It happens a lot more than you think, and it impacts the mindset of those victims. And those are things that they carry on into the future that may impact a relationship that they're in. No matter how healthy, that man may be, she's still going to be struggling with the fact that she had been abused at one point. And I think most men are probably 100% never going to do anything bad to a woman in their own power, right? However, I think the more challenging thing comes in when it's on us to say something, to defend when it's not us being the perpetrator. So for example, going back to the R. Kelly situation, there were a lot of people that knew what was going on, but they didn't say anything. And these people, they were adults. Now, most of them worked for R. Kelly, and I don't think that they would want to put themselves in a position to find themselves unemployed. But at the same time, I would expect an adult to stand up for children. And furthermore, in the case where he was accused of urinating on an underage girl, the girl and her family both said that it was not her. However, there were other family members saying that that was indeed her. And the crazy thing is, the victim's father worked for R. Kelly. So to me, it sounds like that father, that parent or parents, they sacrificed their daughter's well-being for a check. And I don't want to take anything else from the documentary, but it's worth watching to find out about how much more prevalent sexual assault and abuse is. And it's important for us to change our mindset and to speak up for women when we have the opportunity to do so. Otherwise, these problems are going to continue going on and on and on into the future. And whenever there is a case where it's another Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein, where people say, oh, well, are they telling the truth? And well, at this point, yes, because we're questioning the truth of it because we never acknowledged the problem. This is new to us, but it's been real to them the entire time, right? And on top of that, when it comes to R. Kelly, I think one of the reasons that he was able to get away with the things that he did is because almost all of his victims were black women, a class of people that are typically looked down upon, or at least just given a general lack of respect in our society. And I think had any woman's complexion been lighter, R. Kelly would have been in jail a long time ago. So I think that this movement is appropriate. Now, granted, we don't have all the facts outside of the accusations that these women have brought forward. But when you have, that many people giving their account of abuse at your hands, that's some pretty damning testimony, in my opinion. Only time is going to tell what happens to Mr. Kelly in the future. But it seems like the Meet R. Kelly movement is doing it in the appropriate way. They are going after the money more so than anything else by helping stop his concerts in a number of cities, as well as encouraging people to not listen to his music on streaming services. However, we have learned that since his program has aired, his streams have been through the roof. They've actually doubled. Now, that's not surprising to me because you just told a bunch of people to not do something, so of course they're going to go do it. I'm interested to hear your opinions on any story that I've mentioned today. Feel free to drop me a comment down below. I've got a link to all the sources that I've used for these topics. So until next time, peace.